Welcome to Tomorrow Makers, where we explore how we learn, live, work, and play now and in the future. I am Summer Beatty.
And I'm Carlos Ramos.
All right, so we're here today with Summer Buchevich, business professor at Penn College, and she is coming to us open and willing to discuss mental health through her personal journey. We do have fun with this one again. We're going to say it. I said to her, I don't know if there's been 2 summers on a podcast before, but we did it. And I just think she is so candid and open, and we hope that it impacts you like it did us. And, even if you're not somebody who experiences anxiety, believe it or not, you're probably in contact with somebody and you might or might not know it. So,
and, I felt so much calmer after this episode, and there were just some clear ways that we could handle anxiety at any level, whether it's, I'm usually pretty even keeled, but I can have my moments. I'm sure we all do.
Sure.
So helpful, and I really appreciate her coming out and doing this with us.
Yeah, for sure.
So,
Sure.
Here we go.
Do it.
Yeah, how are we going to do that? I don't know. You tell me.
Whoa. Do what? We're just going to start.
Oh, okay.
Do you think 2 summers have ever been in a podcast together before
I don't know. We need a researcher.
in the history of podcasts? Which
Do you
is
have
still
a fact
pretty
checker
early.
yet?
Yeah,
It's kind of strange.
it is.
I love it, though.
Wow.
Summer bees, no less.
Oh, right.
Summer
yeah.
bee. Mhm.
And marketing background.
Yeah.
2 summer bees. So
Yeah,
here we are.
That's weird.
Oh. All right. Are we ready?
We're
ready.
Yeah,
Okay, great.
Let's do this.
Okay. So I think it makes sense. We'll have you introduce yourself.
Okay.
Let us know who you are.
Who am I? Boy, I
Yeah.
don't
Your
know.
role at Penn College, and then we can just kind of go into mental health and
Okay.
why that topic is kind of near and dear to your heart.
Sounds good. So my name is Summer Buchevich, and I'm actually going into my 10th year. Speaking
Wow.
of 10 years, my 10th year teaching full time here at the college, and I taught 2 years prior to that as an adjunct. I am in business administration, so I teach marketing and management courses, a whole variety of them, 100 level up to 400 level, and boy, what else do I do here? A lot. Academic advising on a couple committees, advisor to the Penn College Business Club. So yeah, that is what I do here.
Nice.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So for some, it might be like, oh, this is interesting. So there's this marketing background. What the heck does mental health have to do
Yeah,
with
so
anything?
it's funny. As I was sitting down this morning trying to think about, oh my gosh, how am I going to respond to these questions? What am I going to say? I was thinking about a book that I had listened to on Audible earlier this summer called Range by David Epstein. I don't know
Yes.
if either of you heard.
I have it.
Oh,
Uh-huh.
okay. Fantastic. So then you will know that it is about the importance of generalists
Yes.
in a specialized world. And so I don't know. I feel like I've always worn many hats. And I don't think it's a bad thing to wear many hats so long as you can balance all of those
Sure.
hats appropriately. Do you want to hear the origin story, like how all of this came to be? Is that
Sure.
helpful?
I think
Okay.
that would give some nice context. to the
Okay, gotcha.
conversation.
So, connection to mental health. So it's interesting. I guess I should preface this by saying I never really thought I would be in higher ed. Growing up, I wanted to be a teacher, but I was dissuaded from doing so for a variety of reasons. Ended up majoring in communication in college, doing communication in grad school with a focus in PR, so very like marketing adjacent. But the mental health piece started when I was in college, and I've been very open about this, and I'm willing to be very open about this now, especially. So when I was in college, I was a first-year college student. Nobody in my family had ever been to college before. My father, single-parent household. My father didn't even really understand the college landscape, so I was the one, doing the FAFSA, trying to navigate everything myself. And it was my sophomore year where one night I laid down in my bed to go to sleep. and my heart started racing. And I was like, oh, that's weird. Why is that happening? And then I started getting lightheaded and a little nauseous. So I got up and I was like, what's wrong? Is something wrong with me? What's going on? These are uncomfortable sensations. And of course I didn't have the clarity of mind to, say things like that to myself at that moment.
Right.
So I ran into the bathroom and I splashed water on my face and I tried to calm myself down. And I started just shaking and I'm like, what in the world is going on?
Yeah.
What am I? The two thoughts that immediately popped up were, am I having a heart attack? Am I having a stroke? Am I having a medical emergency?
Sure,
I don't know. What do I do? Do I call 911? Is this nothing? I have no clue. So the solution at the time for my 19-year-old self was to go out into the hallway in my dormitory. It was like 2 or 3 in the morning. And I just wandered the halls, drew on people's whiteboards to try and distract myself. And I eventually started feeling better. So I was like, okay, whatever it is past. I'm sure I'm fine. Go to bed. And I was so exhausted by that point that I was able to fall asleep pretty readily. But the next day I was in my astronomy class. It was a course I didn't really want to take, but it's one of those gen ed kind of things.
Right.
And I started feeling those feelings again. And I immediately became afraid of what that might mean. I felt lightheaded. I felt kind of cold and clammy. And I had another panic attack. Of course, at that point, I didn't know it was a panic attack.
I was going to ask, did you have a name for it?
Yeah, no, I didn't have a name for it yet. I just knew that something weird was happening to me, and it was really uncomfortable. And so to extend what could be a long story into a very short little capsule, they did end up being diagnosed as panic attacks, and they continued to bother me and completely alter the rest of my college career, my grad career, and the majority of my 20s.
Okay.
So, yeah.
So back to the time when you started feeling this way. How did you go from, what is this? Am I having a heart attack to putting a name on it?
Yeah, that's a good question. Well, it's an interesting journey that it kind of took me into. I went to my primary care doctor. And of course, I had to drive, home from college to do that, which was challenging in and of itself, because once you start getting panic attacks and you get behind the wheel of a car, it's not so easy, especially if you have to drive, a considerable distance. So I went to my family doctor and I told him my symptoms. And he said, that sounds like a textbook panic attack. Here's some meds. Go back to school. You're fine. I was like, oh, okay. And it was comforting hearing from him that my symptoms were aligned with what panic attacks were. But I was not given coping strategies. I was not given a toolbox. I was given a bottle of pills. Yeah, which made things really, really difficult. I still kind of believed, what he had told me. Hey, you're experiencing panic attacks. But every single time I would get them, I would start to kind of question his diagnosis and rely a little bit too much, on the medication that he gave me. So that was a huge challenge, and it made the rest of my college career so much more difficult. I did my best, but I wasn't able to, how do I word this? I don't know. I wasn't really able to thrive.
Right. I was going to say, how can you experience everything to the fullest if you're worried that's going to keep happening?
Exactly.
Yeah. And was there a trigger or?
So that's a great question. At that point in time, I don't necessarily think there was a defined trigger. Okay. I did develop triggers as time went on, mostly triggers that were related to the situations in which I had the panic attacks. So first panic attack occurred while laying in my dorm room bed, right? So that became almost like a bad place. I had to switch my pillow to the other side of the twin bed to try and trick myself into thinking, hey, this is a different place. Right. Like, you're not going to panic here. But then once I had a panic attack in that other, formulation, that other layout of the bed, like, I was like, I don't know what to do. I don't know where to sleep, because both both setups feel scary and triggering.
Right.
And then once I had a panic attack while driving became a panic trigger.
Okay.
Which is especially problematic. I did go to school here in Williamsport, and I'm originally from the Wilkes-Barre area, Kingston specifically. So if you're not familiar with Route 118, 118 kind of goes through the middle of nowhere when you're trying to get from Williamsport to Kingston.
I've been upside down on 118.
Have you?
What?
Oh, yeah.
That's horrifying.
Yeah.
That is horrifying.
It was bad,
You're okay, though.
but I'm okay.
You're okay. That's good. I, too, was in the back of an ambulance on 118 once because I had a panic attack so severe that I just had to pull over and lay down in my car. There was no cell phone service, so I couldn't reach out to anybody. Thankfully, some volunteer firefighter pulled up to the car and was like, "Hey, are you doing okay?" And I was like, "Not really."
Wow.
And so he was able to,
Yeah.
to radio for an ambulance to come. Yeah.
And it is the middle of nowhere.
Yeah, it really is. Yeah. So
Okay,
yeah,
just side note, we'll circle back to why Carlos was upside down on the
Oh,
what
good
was it,
Lord.
118?
118.
118,
Cass,
yeah.
I'm not going there.
don't.
No, it doesn't
Yeah, no,
sound like a
there's,
place I
there's no,
wanna go.
no, just take 80 if
That's
you want to
where
go to
I'm
Wilkes-Barre.
going at 3 o'clock in the morning on tomorrow.
Oh no.
Yeah.
3 in the morning?
Yeah.
Watch for deer.
Yeah.
Oh, you can't control when the airplanes come and go though. So
Oh, that's true.
he's going to the airport.
Oh, okay, fair.
Yeah. Oh wow. So what a journey. Oh my
Yeah.
goodness. So you had mentioned, which I think I know where you're going with this, hopefully. You were given pills. Like, okay, here's the solution.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
But
yeah.
it sounds like now this was a bit ago, you've come a ways. Since
Oh,
then,
yes.
how did you, there's more to solution rather than pills. So what
absolutely.
did you
Well,
figure out? Who were your resources? How?
it's such a big question with a lot packed into it, and I'm trying to just kind of think now of how I want to organize it.
Oh,
you know?
definitely.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying, oh, okay. I mean, I'm guessing it's not okay. I was not well then, and I'm great now.
Yeah.
Like it's a
Yeah.
process. It's always work,
Yeah,
right?
it's fun to pretend like, oh yeah, I just flipped a switch and everything's fine. But no, there was a lot of hard work
I'm
between
guessing.
then and now.
Yes.
So after I first realized that, the temporary short-term meds weren't going to be effective in the long term, I did go to see a therapist before mental health parity was a thing, right? So it was a short one-off thing, a little session with a therapist in college. Kind of ineffective. She told me, "Hey, yeah, your symptoms are consistent with panic disorder, so that's good. When you start feeling yourself feel those anxious feelings, feeling like you're woozy, feeling like your heart is racing, just stop and tell yourself, stop. It's okay. You don't need to panic." And I was
Why
like,
didn't I think of that?
Yeah. That's cool. I'll try that next time. And I tried that next time and it didn't work, of course, because
Right.
why would it? So I ended college thinking that's what therapy is. Okay, clearly that's not going to be helpful for me. So maybe there's another kind of medication. So I ended up getting on another type of medication, an SSRI, which oh boy, I have a lot to say about that, but I'll be kind of short and sweet
Do you
about
want
it.
to give an example of like what that would be? So that's serotonin reuptake inhibitor.
Yes, exactly. So specifically Paxil. And
Okay.
I'll never forget my doctor. I went to him and I said, "Hey, doctor, these panic attacks are still really bothering me. This prescription for Xanax is, it's useful sometimes, but I don't want to be on this all the time." And he said, "Okay, well, we can put you on an SSRI." I pulled out his prescription pad and he actually said, Celexa or Paxil? Celexa or Paxil? We'll go with the Paxil. I have some samples for you. Because, we didn't have a whole lot of money, so I appreciated samples for sure. And so I ended up on the lowest dose of Paxil in college. And it was great until I couldn't afford it anymore. And during my senior year of college, I couldn't afford it. So I said, I'm done. I have maybe 10 more pills. I'll take one every other day and then I'll just stop. And this is before they knew that SSRI withdrawal symptom was a thing. But it is. So I ended my college career. This had to be the last 2 months of college in withdrawal from SSRIs with a very disconcerting symptom called the brain zaps. I don't know if you're familiar with those or if you've ever heard of them, but every time you
explain that?
Yeah, every time you turn your neck to the side, you get this like electrical sensation that kind of runs from the top of your head down through your
great.
spine.
That
Yeah.
sounds-
It's a great way to finish out your college career.
Oh,
You feel wonderful, and it just it's
Wow.
awful. So I somehow figured out a way, and I can't remember the details of that. I think I convinced my dad to give me $40 so I can get another month's subscription for it, or prescription, so that I didn't have to deal with that, because I knew I was going on to grad school and I needed to be in good form for that, because I knew I had a big challenge ahead.
Right.
And then once grad school came, it was challenging for sure, right? I did my master's program at the University of Delaware, and, like any grad program, I'm holding up my hands about like a foot apart. There's like this much reading every semester. It's insane. But the Paxil dulled my senses. It made a lot of things disinteresting, uninteresting, one of those words.
Yeah, we got you.
Yeah, thank you. So at that point, I was like, I'm doing well enough. Maybe I can stop taking this medication. And that was honestly the beginning of my mental health journey. I tell myself that was the beginning, because that's when I really began participating in mental health communities online.
Okay.
And began publishing work writing basically on the patient experience.
Okay.
So what had happened then is I started to slowly withdraw from Paxil, because I didn't want those brain zaps anymore.
Right.
And it was a long process. Doctors were not convinced at that point in time, like I said, that withdrawal was a thing. So, I worked with an online community of people who were going through the same thing. On a whim, one night, wrote a submission. The LA Times had some kind of article about SSRIs, and I was like, I want to write like a letter to the editor style thing to the person who wrote that article, because, this is like the first person who's ever written about SSRI withdrawal or, referred to it or something. So there I am at like 1 a.m. typing out this long missive about what my experience was like. And I sent it in. I'm like, I'll never hear back. The next day I heard back. They're like, we're going to publish your thing. And I was like, oh my God, that's amazing. So that was really exciting. And so ever since then, I have had a series of fortunate kind of events occur that have kind of given me a platform to speak out about mental health experiences. I was very hesitant when I was told that my work was going to be published, because I realized, I'm like, I'm going to have to tell everybody now what's going on with me. I really didn't tell anybody in college except for a couple close friends. I most certainly didn't tell anybody in grad school, because, grad school's kind of cutthroat, you really don't want to show your weak side, or at least back then, in the late aughts, lest you be, I don't want to say targeted. It's not like that, but you don't want to show where your weaknesses are, because everyone else seems so strong and so intelligent, right? And imposter syndrome is a big thing.
Sure.
So I kind of I think the phrase I used was, came out of the medicine cabinet. At that point, hi, I have anxiety. My name is Summer. I take medication. This is what's going on with me.
How was that received at that time?
Surprisingly well.
Oh, good.
Surprisingly well. I was very nervous, but as people began to see that article, both within my grad school circle and in the community in general, and when I say community, I really mean like the nation, because it was the LA Times, right? It was very well received. I got, I don't know, probably 12 emails the first day. By the end of the first week, I probably had up to maybe about 100 people email me saying, oh my God, this is exactly what I'm going through. I have experienced that, and I haven't heard anybody anybody in public ever talk about these withdrawal side effects from these, these psychiatric meds. So thank you so much for putting that out there.
Yeah.
And something clicked in me when I began getting those messages again and again. I was like, okay, this is something that needs to be talked about. There is absolutely no reason to keep mental health struggles and, their adjacent issues like medication therapy, et cetera. There is no reason to keep that stuff quiet. Let's talk about it. This is stuff that we all experience, maybe not all of us, but many of us, right? You said, 1 in 4 U.S. adults are living with some type of a mental illness. So heck, isn't it time we talk about it?
Yeah, great point. Was there anyone close to you that was like, I had no idea. Why didn't you come say something?
Yes.
Okay.
So it's really funny that you mentioned that in college in particular. I remember a friend of mine named Crystal. I was walking to class one day and, it was fall. I had my warm, cozy sweater on. I had my little messenger bag. And I was just, I was smiling on the way to class. And Crystal comes up to me and she's like, Summer, oh my gosh, you look so relaxed. I wish I could be as calm as you are. And I'm like,
and inside you're just this boiling knot of.
Exactly. I'm like, God, I guess I really do hide it well. But is that right?
Yeah.
Like, is that right? Do we need to be hiding these things? I grew up with a boomer dad who, kind of grew up during that time of, oh no, if you have a problem, you
Right. You suck it up.
Yeah, you suck it up. You keep it inside your chest until you die, I guess. I don't know. That's not my philosophy.
Sure.
I feel good when I share my story and I share my experiences because I know that there are people out there listening who also struggle with the same issues. And I mean, if I could have had, I don't want to say a mentor really, but if I had been in college and I could find, somebody who is older, experienced, somebody who's already in the workforce, who would be willing to raise their hand and say, hey, I have a decent job. I've had success in my life. And I struggle with anxiety severely, but I'm doing okay.
I figured it out. Yeah.
I would have had such a different experience. I really thought this was the end of the world for me.
Right.
Yeah.
So here you are teaching at a college, and if you think about your former self sitting in that classroom, so have you had an opportunity to be that person?
Yes.
For you? Oh, nice.
I absolutely have. Several students, clearly won't name them, but one student that comes to mind in particular, she was a non-traditional student, I think in her later 20s, had a young child, and just very clearly, I forget what really kind of tipped me off. I think it was absences. Absences, without communicating with me. And I reached out to her one day via email, and I was like, hey, I just want to check in. Is everything okay? I noticed that you haven't been coming to class. I know you mentioned something about, you have a 2-year-old. I have a kid. Things are challenging when you have a kid. Just, how are things? And she said that she was really struggling. And so she opened up to me a little bit via email. So I actually referred her to counseling. If I remember correctly, she wasn't aware that counseling was available for free on campus, with her, her being a student. And she wrote back to me a couple days later, and she said, yeah, counseling reached out to me, and I struggled with it for a few days. I felt a little uncomfortable at first, but then I realized that I'm really grateful that that's a thing that you did.
Sure, yeah.
And so she did pursue counseling. I came back to class, did fine in class, and I actually keep in touch with this student on Facebook, and she is thriving with her now older kiddo. So
That's awesome.
Yeah. It just makes my heart so happy, because I feel like I'm uniquely positioned, to talk with students and to help them and to at least give them resources, right? Because when you're a college student and you're feeling extremely stressed, having problems with anxiety, you don't necessarily know what to do or where to turn.
Right.
So,
and it's a process. It's a journey too.
It really is. Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, it's such a time of life that's just fraught with change as well. And I'm sure that doesn't do anything to amplify.
Oh yeah, nothing at all. No, it's funny. I'll be, well, I won't say exactly how old I'm in my late 30s. I'll say that. And as a lot of my friends are, approaching 40, they're like, God, I wish I can go back to my 20s again. And I'm like, I don't wish that, because my 20s were full of confusion and difficulty. And I just didn't know how to handle what life had thrown at me yet. But that's something that developed over time.
Right. So if we do think about that process, I know you can't say, oh, just do this and it'll fix it. But what are some of those really important steps that you have taken to get from where you were to where you are?
Okay.
now?
Well, I will definitely say therapy is one of them, one of those things. And I encourage that of all students who come to me saying like, hey, I'm having trouble, struggling with balancing work and school, or school and life, or what have you. Incredibly helpful. A lot of students, and I think this is changing, right? But therapy used to be seen, at least in my circles, as something you do if you don't know how to solve a problem yourself. And my perspective on therapy is much different than that now. I really think, and I tell students this verbatim, going to counseling, engaging in therapy is like taking a college level course on you, on yourself, right? It's like walking into a room with a big mirror, and that mirror actually shows you what's going on in you, right? So that you can understand yourself in a new way. And I think that's something that we can all really benefit from more, because how can we be, we talk about tomorrow makers, right? I teach management. How can we be good decision makers? How can we be good leaders in organizations? How can we manage others if we can't understand ourselves, right? That all of that has to come first. So I encourage therapy to a lot of students. Now, I've done a lot of other things in my time, different types of therapy. So I guess it's important to mention as well, excuse me, that once I went into my first job after grad school, well, first of all, I finished my graduate degree right at the beginning of the recession. So that was nice. So I was underemployed for a while, working in a call center. Call centers are, boy, I don't know. I've never read Dante's Inferno, but it some level of hell, some very, very deep level of hell.
I'm imagining that episode of The Office where Michael is in the call center. I don't know if anyone's seen that.
I probably have. I don't remember it though. But yeah, it
paints the picture for me. But
okay.
Yeah, sorry to interrupt.
No, that's okay. It's just very difficult for somebody in particular who has anxiety, right? Because what do? They sit you down at a desk. You put a set of headphones on, and they say, okay, stay there. You're only allowed a 6-minute break to go to the bathroom. Your breaks are very rigidly structured, and all of that feeling like I'm out of control, that helped to amp up my anxiety even more. Funny story about the call center that I think is worth mentioning. And I share this story in my organizational behavior courses because I think it's just such a good example of not like what you should not do if you want to put people first in an organization and care for their mental health and well-being. We hit some sort of like metric goal, right? And as a result, they said, hey, you guys get a pizza party. And we were like, yeah, pizza party, cool. So there were like 20 of us. But for business needs, in order to keep the phones adequately staffed, we all had to go into this conference room and eat pizza by ourselves. We all had a 10-minute time slot. And then we had to return to our desk, and then the next person can go to the pizza party.
By themselves?
By themselves,
yeah. Single person
person, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So just to kind of add context to what this place was like. So while I was there, of course, I wasn't using my skills. I wasn't using what I had learned in grad school. So the anxiety started to really come back with a vengeance. And I started getting panic attacks again, to the point where I ultimately had to leave because I just simply couldn't handle it anymore. And I was going somewhere with this, but I can't remember where I was going
okay.
with it. Oh, actually, I do, because I looked at my notes here and I just realized that's kind of what started the transition from me being, what's the word I'm looking for here? From anxiety having a hold on me to me beginning to have a hold on anxiety.
Okay.
So I took some time off of work. That's when we actually moved up here to the Williamsport area. And I ended up, as a result of my LA Times article, I ended up being invited to write for a website called Psych Central.
Okay.
So I began writing for their World of Psychology blog, and then eventually they gave me my own blog called Panic About Anxiety. And that is where I kind of hit my stride, I guess.
Yeah.
I started writing articles about, my personal experiences, offering up tips, not from the standpoint of a therapist, but just from the standpoint of like, oh, hi, I'm an everyday human being who has experienced this. So let me just kind of share what it's like for somebody with an anxiety disorder at the dentist. Here's a couple tips to make things easier, etc. And that made me feel super impactful. Got a lot of comments, got a lot of emails from people saying, hey, oh my God, thank you.
I relate.
Thank you for
yes.
writing about that. Yeah. And, the article, maybe this is a tangent, but I'll share it anyway. The article that I got the most feedback on, I wrote a piece about exercise-induced anxiety, because that's one of the things, and students are told this all the time too, right? Oh, if you're anxious, go for a run.
Mm-hmm.
Get some exercise. That'll help you feel better. Well, when you get panic attacks,
How well do you run while your heart is racing?
well, and it's not quite that. It's that, like, once your heart starts racing when you're running, it reminds you of having a panic attack. And so it's like a triggering kind of event. So, I got all this poor advice. Start running. You'll feel better. No, I didn't feel better. I just kind of felt like I was self-inducing a panic attack, which is not a very good thing. And so that set me back a little bit. But once I got to Williamsport here, and I was writing for Psych Central for a period of time, managing my own blog, producing content, producing videos, I ended up applying for and being accepted to, I think it was the first iteration of TEDx Williamsport. And I did a talk there about how I managed my anxiety at the call center and how I kind of climbed out of that hellhole that I had been in.
Yeah.
The general theme of that was, let me see if I remember the words here: migrate, hibernate, adapt. I was watching a documentary, like a nature documentary show, because, that's kind of nerdy. I don't watch popular TV. I watch documentaries. What are you going to do?
Nothing wrong with that.
Yeah, right?
Yeah.
And, so it was about animals, and it just kind of randomly mentioned that, when they're in an environment that doesn't serve them, animals really only have three options. They can hibernate, they can adapt, or they can migrate. And something about that stuck with me. I was like, oh my God, do I have all this anxiety because I am trying to function within the parameters of an environment that just doesn't work for me?
Mm-hmm.
And that was a big turning point. And I think that was actually the theme of the TEDx event, like transitions or turning points or something like that. Breakthroughs. That's what it was,
Nice.
breakthroughs. So after I did that talk, I got a lot of feedback, positive feedback about that. People from call centers all over the world, United States, India, Philippines, commenting, saying, oh my God, I have panic attacks at work too. I hate my call center. It's soul sucking. I can't handle it. Right. And so that kind of thing really got me thinking. And I got into this idea of, what does it take to create a workplace that is healthy for people?
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
That is an environment that does support the employees, that does support others. And I would call that the beginning of my slow transition to Penn College.
Okay. Wow.
Yeah, I know. It's a weird
Nice.
road. It's a weird road.
No, it's the real road.
It's the real road. Yeah,
that happens.
It's true.
Right.
Mhm.
So it sounds like community was huge for you. You started, researching topics online and then being part of an online community.
Yes.
And then also almost forming a community by way of this outreach, be it through articles or through the TED Talk, whatever it is. So how has that transformed into your today? Like, how are there any communities that you're part of now, or anything that I'm just thinking for listeners that are thinking, wow, this resonates with me? Is there something I should be a part of? Is there something I should be, a blog or a podcast, or how do they, you know where I'm going with this? Like, I don't know if there's anything.
There's a podcast I like listening to called The Anxious Overachiever, which I swear it's not my own podcast. You would think it were, though, where they basically interview anxious overachievers, which I think I qualify as. So that's one recommendation. But, my other recommendations are a little bit more nebulous, right? There's no one particular community that I've found solace in, but my recommendation would be just try to find a community. It used to be a lot more difficult than it is now.
I would think so.
Yeah.
It seems so much more, everyone seems open now, and it's just more, I don't want to say mainstream, but it's more talked about.
It is. And I know that social media gets, we'll say, crapped on a lot for a lot of reasons. And some of those reasons are very justifiable. But I mean, one of the things I wrote about for Psych Central was like the intersection of technology and mental health. And so that's something that I've been continually interested in, even throughout my journey, professionally. I haven't done any work with it professionally, but, it's definitely something that just I'm always kind of noticing and focusing on. And TikTok, of all places, right? TikTok seems to have, and I say this cautiously, right? Because if you're on the wrong side of TikTok, you're not going to see this kind of content. But once you start liking positive content that is related to a mental health issue with which you identify, you start seeing more and more of that content.
Okay.
And TikTok is a place where I have found a pretty decent community of folks. Now, I'm not really a creator on there. I've kind of put content creation on the back seat ever since, beginning to teach, because let's face it, teaching takes a lot of time and work and energy, right? And I'm all about protecting my energy now to make sure that my anxiety stays below the threshold over which it would cause problems. But there really is, I think there's really a community to be found out there on TikTok and on Instagram as well. When I was going through my doctoral dissertation process a couple of years ago in 2020 during a global pandemic.
You have great timing.
I do, honestly.
Achievements.
Gosh, it's ridiculous. But I found a community on there of other people who were working on their EDDs and PhDs at the same time. And honestly, even if it's just one or two people who you can empathize with, who can empathize with you, who can understand what you're going through and some of your struggles, it can honestly make a world of difference.
Right. So even if you're not the one struggling, and it's important to be aware of what's happening, with those around you, the people you're working with, the people within your family, your friend group, everyone.
Yeah, absolutely. And I do think that people talk more about mental health now. And I've often chewed on that question, like, why? What exactly changed? Is it just the fact that social media exists, or are we seeing a greater cultural shift? Does it have something to do with Gen Z being primarily raised by Gen X? Boomers are kind of, aging upward. It's many of us millennials are still kind of struggling with it. But a lot of my students are Gen Z, and they're just so willing to come to me and be like, oh yeah, hey, so I have bipolar disorder, or hey, I have ADHD. Can we talk about this or that? And I'm like, wow, you guys are just coming
throwing it
to
out
me
there.
and throwing it out there. And that's amazing. Like I absolutely love that. And I really think that the world is changing for the better in that regard.
Yeah. Yeah. So back to, you had mentioned that they were just very forthcoming with that information. Did you feel a sense of relief when you put those articles out there and came out and it finally was just like, you know what? Yeah, I got this going on and it is what it is.
Yeah.
And
Yeah. So I think authenticity is very important for wellness, right? If you are trying to present a version of yourself to the world that doesn't fully represent who you are, I think in the end, you kind of end up burnt out, right? Because maintaining that mask, maintaining that facade, maintaining that, oh, yes, I'm a great professional who can do anything. And I can, what do job descriptions read like? Like, oh, we're looking for somebody who is a self-starter, who's task-oriented or detail-oriented and can handle simultaneous tasks. It's like, no, that's not me. Like, that's not me at all, right? And for the period of my life when I was working in industry, when I was trying to be exactly that, I think that's one of the things that really ramped up my anxiety. And so over the years, I've learned honestly that authenticity is what is going to result in, so many better outcomes, but professionally, when you are authentic, you're going to find a better person-organization fit, to use a term that we use in organizational behavior. And I think that's to everybody's benefit, not only organization or not only people, but organizations as well.
Yeah, definitely. So how does mindset factor into all of this? I mean, that's huge, right? That's something that's being talked about a lot.
Yeah.
So is that part of your, we'll say, practice?
So I have a couple things to say about mindset. So when I think about mindset, I really think about self-talk, right? And the things that we say to ourselves really do matter. And I know it sounds kind of like woo-woo to say that, right? I'm not standing in front of the mirror every morning saying like, you are intelligent, you are capable, right? Even though I'm asking my 7-year-old to do that sometimes because I feel like
that's a whole other line
for her
of questioning because being a parent, right? I'm like, okay, so there's all this, everything you've learned, and then you're wanting to make sure this little person does the right things, right?
Exactly. So I don't do that, but the stories that we tell ourselves about the experiences that we undergo, I think are really valuable. So I had a professor in college who had us do this little activity with language. And I honestly cannot remember what her rationale for this activity was, but I've kind of, changed it up a little bit. And I do this with my students, right? To give them a sense of understanding of the way language can impact the way we think. So if I were to do this with you right now, I would say, hey, Carlos, hey, Summer, I am going to give you two pairs of opposites. Or I'm sorry, a pair of opposites, like hot and cold. What word describes the middle of that? Like what's directly in the middle of hot and cold?
Go right to warm.
Warm?
Yeah.
Yeah, warm. Okay. How about top and bottom?
This is fascinating because I was thinking of food. I was thinking ice cream and then coffee. And then I'm like, what's in the middle? I don't know.
Coffee. Yeah.
So that's so funny how the brain works, though, right?
It's true.
We're all so different.
Yep, this is true.
Okay. What's the lesson
Well,
in this? I'm excited
I have
to hear.
two more.
There's more questions.
Yeah,
I'm
there
like
are.
ready for the quiz.
Right.
Top and bottom. What's the term that would fall in the, and I don't want to say the
middle.
Middle. Okay. Left and right.
Center.
Okay.
Now I'm falling
There's
in
going to
line
be a trick
here.
question here. And
I
it's going
know.
to be like, what do you put in a toaster?
How about happy and sad?
Content.
Content. Okay. Okay, I think we've done enough. So think about those words. Middle, medium, lukewarm, whatever we said before. Content. Mocha. Other than mocha,
Okay.
all of those words are fairly bland,
Yeah.
right? They're not super sexy. They're not super exciting. So when we tell stories to ourselves, at least this is what I've seen in my own brain, we tend to exaggerate to make those stories exciting and interesting. So there's many times where I've walked into work, back when I was working in industry, saying things like, "Oh my God, I'm exhausted," and then I check myself. I'm like, "Am I really exhausted, or am I just mildly tired?" Mildly tired doesn't have the same kick to it as exhausted does, right?
Right.
So I'm being bold in my language to be interesting, but I'm also telling myself a story that is a little bit exaggerated, and then I'm internalizing that story. Do we really want to be doing that, right? Our language has no very, descriptive, beautiful, sexy words for those middle ground, kind of concepts, right? And so I think that's an important lesson to learn, because our language in and of itself can kind of help us to exaggerate. And so I try, when you talk about mindset, like I said, I think of self-talk. I try to catch myself when I am telling myself a story about the kind of day I had, or, the kind of stressor that I know I'm about to experience, right? Like, so we're coming up on the fall 23 semester. I have a lot to prep. Now, I said the word a lot. I kind of wanted to say I have a million things to prep. I don't have a million things to prep. So I think just checking yourself for exaggeration and correcting yourself, getting yourself back to reality can be really helpful in reducing anxiety. So that's where I think mindset
I
comes
love it.
in.
Yeah, I think that's great.
Can I say a word on mindfulness while we're talking
I
about
think
words
you
that start
should.
with mind? Okay. So I did my dissertation on mindfulness. So many people might look at me and think, "Oh my gosh, you must be a huge advocate of mindfulness." And to a degree, I am. But I will say, when I was at the University of Delaware in what I call grad school round 1, so my master's, I took a group therapy class, basically for people who were dealing with anxiety. And that's where I was first introduced to mindfulness. And I had a hell of a time with it. It was so incredibly hard because, what is mindfulness, right? It's paying attention to the present moment intentionally without judgment, okay? What distresses somebody with panic disorder the most? Often the present moment, those uncomfortable sensations, right? The feeling of your heart beating, the feeling of, feeling a little sweaty, clammy, etc. So mindfulness over the years has kind of I've become more friendly with it, right? But for beginners, it's not a be-all, end-all solution. And if I could also say my piece about mindfulness kind of on the societal level. I mean, mental health it's a huge issue now, especially post-COVID, right? We have more people who need therapy, who are seeking therapy than we have mental health therapists out there. So a lot of organizations are saying, "Hey, here's some mindfulness activities." And for those who obviously can't see, which is anybody, I'm like pretending to throw something in the air here, right? T-shirts. Here's mindfulness for you. Yeah. Does that work? I don't know. Maybe it works for a couple people. But when organizations tell their employees, like, "Hey, you should try to be mindful," that puts the impetus on the individual to deal with anxiety that might stem not from themselves and the way that they're handling the world, but, from the organization at large, placing unreasonable requests on the employee. That might come from, stresses from society that, cannot really be responded to with mindfulness, right? So to me now, I see mindfulness kind of as it has the potential to just be a Band-Aid fix if it's not implemented the right way. If somebody seeks out mindfulness and uses it for their own benefit to help them with anxiety or depression or any other, mental health issue, fantastic. But if it is given to somebody from an authority, from an organization, I really think it's just a quick fix that's hiding potentially a larger problem. I think it's important to mention, excuse me, that mental health, we often look at individuals and say, oh, if that person's having a mental health problem, it's probably something in their brain chemical related. Maybe it has to do with trauma they experienced, and maybe all of that's true. But we also have to look at the environment in which an individual works, lives, plays, and ask ourselves, does the environment serve and support that person? So that's my piece on that.
Well, that's interesting. But you got your master's in mindfulness?
No. So my master's was in communication and public relations.
okay.
Yeah. So my doctoral dissertation.
Okay. So you're
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry,
No,
to
that's
interrupt.
okay.
And I'm
That's
like,
okay.
wait a minute. Does she I can't tell if you're like for it or not. But it's obviously something you were like, I want to dig into this a little bit more.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and my research was primarily on what students here at Penn College perceive mindfulness to be,
Right.
and how they envision it potentially being a part of their management career. So, I interviewed current management students,
Okay.
Asked about their perceptions of mindfulness, how they engage in mindful activity, and where they see that kind of intersecting with their careers, if at all.
Okay, I understand.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yep.
gotcha. Nice. No, should we have? I feel like I went totally off the book here. I'm so sorry.
No, don't apologize.
I gave you
tend to,
questions and didn't really ask them
I
in
tend
any
to encourage
particular
people
order,
to do
so-
that. I mean, life is all about tangents, right? I
Yeah.
feel like that's how we find the good stuff.
Right.
When we stick to a script, we don't often. I don't know. We don't often find the fun stuff. I mean, if there's anything else you wanted, we could talk about some of the questions. I'm not in a huge hurry. It's up to you.
Well, what tools would you suggest to someone who they've been listening to this and they're still like, I'm just still not comfortable.
Mm-hmm.
Like I have so much anxiety about my anxiety and the idea of expressing this to someone.
Yeah.
What are some tools that they could turn to?
It's a great question. It's funny that you said anxiety about anxiety. My blog was called Panic About Anxiety. So, very, very meta, right? There's so many wonderful resources on the internet. I can't name any of them because it's been a while since I personally needed them, But I think where a lot of us struggle, and this is obviously coming from my own experience and not everybody else's, but, the folks I've talked to, the people who've emailed me, we have expectations for ourselves, right? And when we struggle to meet those expectations, I think that's something that can really feed into anxiety. And I think if we begin to learn how to talk to ourselves as if we're talking to a friend, I think that can help kind of soften some of those hard feelings, if that makes sense, right? For example, every time I won't say every time, but, just thinking back to some situations in my past where I have a perfectionistic streak. It's true. I do. Where I have wanted to do really well at something and I've kind of only hit like 80, 85%. I occasionally will get really hard on myself. And the self-talk that we engage in there, I think is really important. Right. And so what I've started doing, and I think it was either a therapist or honestly a friend from the internet who told me about this. I can't remember which, but ask yourself, the things that you're telling yourself, would you tell that to a friend? Would you?
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
And I bet most people would say, no way. I would never say that
Yeah.
to
Oh,
someone else."
absolutely.
Yeah.
Right. So if you're caught in that spiral of like, oh my God, I'm never going to get out of this panic spiral. This is, I'm doomed. There's no way I can ever get better. Would you say that to your best friend? Like,
Right.
hey, Jennifer, you're doomed. You're never going to get out of this. Like, no, you would not. Who in their right mind would do that? So why in the world do we do that to ourselves? Right?
Right.
Catching ourselves saying those things, though, that's the big challenge, right? And it took a long time for me to get to that point where I could kind of actively monitor my stream of consciousness as I'm talking.
Right.
And I think that's an important skill set for people to eventually develop. But when you're in the throes of panic, or anxiety or depression or anything like that, you got to reach out to somebody that you trust. I mean, it doesn't always have to immediately be a therapist. It could be a trusted friend. It could be a professor, you know. It could even be, now it could even be Siri. Can I tell a fun story?
Oh, is Siri offering?
Oh, do you want a good story?
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay, so
That's why we're here.
I think I read about this.
did you?
I think so.
My thing?
From your blog. Yeah.
So you Googled me, yeah. As I would expect somebody in PR to do. So 11 or 12 years ago, so I printed out some notes on this just in case I was going to bring it up. So 11 or 12 years ago, when my husband got his first iPhone and I got my first iPad, Siri came on the scene. She was new. She still had that old, weird, robotic voice. And I was on Twitter, too much, but I was on Twitter and I saw somebody make a post that said, I said to Siri, hey, Siri, I want to jump off of a bridge. And Siri responded back with something like, oh, here's the closest bridge. And
Oh.
here's the directions to get to the closest bridge. And I saw that tweet and I was like, you're kidding me. That's not good. Right? So ever curious, I went to my iPad or my husband's iPhone, I can't remember, and I started playing with Siri. And actually made a video. And it's still on YouTube, and it's called Talking to Siri About Suicide. So I started with some innocuous things. Well, not really innocuous, somewhat innocuous things like, Siri, I'm depressed, just to see how she would respond. Siri, I don't want to live anymore. And I escalated, and Siri she was good for nothing. She was good for nothing. I said, Siri, I want to kill myself tomorrow. And so she made an appointment for me for the next day. Yeah. Siri, I want to sleep forever. She gave me a list of hotels.
Oh my goodness,
Yeah.
Siri.
So I made a video about that because I'm like, all right, this kind of has to be exposed, right? I know she's just this little AI digital assistant, but in my mind, thinking about the future, I was like, AI's going to, this is going to grow. Like, eventually Siri's going to do more and be more.
Right.
So I posted that video to YouTube and I got a lot of flack about it. And a lot of people, if you scroll through the comments, a lot of people were like, well, of course she wouldn't give you any real help. I mean, she's just like a robot that lives in your phone. And now look at the way we use digital assistants.
Right.
They're much more integrated into our lives. Between Siri and Alexa, and things have really changed. So after I posted that video, there was a comment that I got on that video that I will never forget. And it said, Summer, a colleague sent this video to me, and I contacted Apple and sent the video. With the guidance of a group of national advisors, we worked with Apple so Siri would refer persons wanting help for suicide to the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline. This change is in effect. Many news articles on this change are now posted on the web. Thanks again, Summer. You really made a difference. From John Draper, PhD, the director of the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline.
Wow.
So that was kind of my peak in mental health advocacy. I was absolutely floored. And it's true. If you ask Siri now for some type of mental health help, whether it's, fairly benign or fairly serious, she will not only refer you to the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline, she will offer to call for you and connect you.
That's
which
amazing.
I think is, I
Wow.
think it's really amazing. I mean, especially students now, right? Early 20s, everyone is just so tech dependent. And there might be that instance where this phone that I'm holding up and shaking is maybe your only support. So to go back to your question, even if you can't reach out to a person, a human being, which is still preferable, it's amazing to me that there are digital tools now that can provide you with at least some degree of crisis level support, maybe not support in and of itself, but connection to supports that can help you.
That's awesome. So have you?
We'll post a link to that article and to the video so
Oh,
people
cool.
can see that, because I think
Yeah.
there's some keys in how you communicate as well when you're putting yourself out there, when you're putting it out on the line, that resonate with those that are in a position to take that change that you're calling for.
Yeah.
And put it into effect.
You never know who's going to see what you post. And I tell my students that in a completely different context. Like, don't post stupid stupid stuff that you're going to regret later on. And I had those feelings initially posting about, mental health related content. But in this instance, I think it's really beneficial, and it's made some positive changes in the world. So,
Good job.
thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
It's great. I didn't know that. I guess
It's a fun story. I haven't really publicized it before, but I figured now would be a nice time to, given the
Definitely.
conversation that we're having. So
Yeah, perfect. Thanks for sharing that.
sure.
So I guess, is there anything we're missing?
I think there is one. There's one angle here. So, we've talked about the individual that's dealing with anxiety. How about those that are, maybe there's somebody who's in your life, in your circle, who's dealing with anxiety, and sometimes we can see it, but I think a lot of times, as we've acknowledged here earlier, it's hidden.
Yeah.
How do we learn to better recognize that from people that are in our lives that might be dealing with that level of anxiety that is crippling, but they're hiding it so well?
That's a great question. I think people who've experienced it before are more likely to be able to recognize that, but it's still challenging. One of the things that I've done is I like to give people space to ask or to answer questions, right? So sometimes I'll be sitting down with a student and I'll say, hey, you haven't been turning in your assignments, right? How are you? And I'll pause, almost to the point of awkwardness, right? And I feel like that pause extends an invitation, right? And some of the things that students respond with after I give them that pause, which I think communicates to them that, hey, I'm really allowing you to speak here. Some of the things that they come back with are really deep and really heavy. So I think if anybody, those of us, whether we, have experience with a mental health issue or not, asking questions of others, really genuinely wanting to know how people are doing, not just that, oh, hey, how are you doing? Oh, I'm doing great. No, let's go beyond that.
That pause is huge.
Let's be a little bit more authentic and, unafraid of receiving an answer that might not
true.
be the
You
most
ask
positive.
and you might receive.
Yeah.
So be ready.
Right. Exactly. And, I think one of the best things that we can do just as humans is listen to one another. We can't solve everybody's problems, right? But, sometimes listening is all that we need. And I tell my husband all the time, and I love him. He's a problem solver, though. So sometimes I'll come home from work and be like, oh, my God, you wouldn't believe this thing that happened today. And I'll tell him the thing, and he'll try to craft a solution for me. And I'll say, no, that's not what I need right now. I need you to listen to what I'm saying. And that's it.
Yep.
That's it. I don't need a solution. I'll figure it out eventually, right? But I just need your ear. And I think if we could more clearly communicate that to others, right? Whether we're having a conversation with them to receive advice or just to receive that helpful ear, why not put that on the forefront? Why not actually state those things so that you can receive what you need from a friend or a colleague or whoever you're talking to?
I think that's great advice, just to to listen, listen and really truly listen.
Yeah.
And because I'm the same way as your husband. I'm like, okay, I'm analyzing. I'm like, okay, well, if I was in this situation, here's what I do. I mean, might do this, might do that, might do the other thing. And I'm exploring 50 different options. And I'm saying, okay, are you ready? Here we go.
Yeah.
You can do this, this.
Yeah.
And rather than that, I probably should just say, well, tell me more.
Unless someone you're talking to really wants a problem solver, you know?
Sure.
And if they
It's
do,
okay
then
to
maybe,
ask, right? Like, are
Right,
you looking
sure.
for a solution, or do you just need someone to listen?
Yeah.
Although that might, I guess, depends on your audience.
Yeah,
Know your audience.
and I think we all had to consider our personal boundaries too. You know, there's been instances where a student will come to me, you know, with an issue, and I'll be like, "Hey, I am having a rough day myself. Can we meet tomorrow at 2:00? And you know, we'll talk about your options." Right? I think protecting our own energy is just as important, because I have so if you come into my office, don't come into my office because it's a mess. But if you come into my office, you'll see on the wall in front of my computer, I have all sorts of quotes and things printed out. And one of them is, you can't pour from an empty cup. And that is something that I really try to live by, because for years I tried to pour from an empty cup. You know, I tried to fit into an environment in which I didn't fit, and it burnt me out. And, you know, I want to prevent my students from having to experience that, right? So I like to give them that reminder. I like to model that reminder. You know, hey, my cup is full right now. I'm dealing with some stuff. I got a busy day. I can't give you the attention that you need. Can we schedule a time when I can be more fully present for you? And I think that's a great thing, you know, because it shows students, it shows young people that, like, that's okay.
You're human. You
Yeah.
are. It's authenticity.
We all are. Exactly. You know, I don't want to put on, you know, some kind of a professional front. Early in my professional career, you know, I did that a lot. You know, I had a very distinct difference between me and the me that I presented in the workplace. And we talk a lot about that in my organizational behavior classes. And generally speaking, that's, you know, from my experience and from what I gather from the research, it's not a healthy long-term behavior. And I don't want my students, you know, having to go through that. You know, I try to teach them that, yeah, you know, you have to be professional at work, but you have to be you. Because if you are not yourself, if you are not authentic, you know, are you going to thrive? Or are you going to just kind of spend your days just, you know, wondering, oh God, boy, when is the weekend here? You know, when am I going to be able to take that vacation? No, you really want to find something that meshes with who you are as a human, and, you know, work in an environment that embraces you for who you are. So.
Well, I think that's a great takeaway. A
Yeah.
great place to wrap it up.
Thank you so much for being with us today and for opening up and for sharing your story.
It was wonderful. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Thanks for hanging out with us today.
Don't forget to rate, review, and subscribe wherever you listen to your podcasts.
Check out our show notes for bookmarks to your favorite sections and links to resources that we mentioned in today's episode.
You can also find past episodes and see what's on deck for upcoming ones at pct.edu/podcast.
And of course, we are open to your thoughts, ideas, and suggestions, so send those over at podcast@pct.edu.
It's been real.
Catch you next time.